General form of a sine or cosine equation. All right, so let's talk about transforming these graphs, these sine and cosine graphs. The general form of sine or cosine, it looks like this, where A, B, C, and D are numbers, some number. um, and each of these numbers, A, B, C, and D, they do something special. I want to point out right away something special about this minus C. So when you go to identify what C is in an equation in your general form, it's minus C. So C is always the opposite sign of whatever you see here. So there's a function down here. This says minus pi over 2, so C is positive pi over 2. C is always opposite the sign you see. I just want to go over some formulas real quick. So amplitude is the absolute value of A. So whatever number you see out here, just whatever the positive version of it is, that is the amplitude. So if I had something like y equals -3 sine x, the amplitude on this would be 3. Amplitude is always a positive number. Something like y equals -5 halves cosine x. The amplitude here, 5 halves. And that wouldn't change. If this was positive, it would still be amplitude of 5 halves. So there is amplitude. Period is 2 pi divided by b. So b is this number right in front of x here, and that's special because b is never going to be 0. If b was 0, then there wouldn't be an x in this, and we wouldn't have a very fun function. So b will never be 0, and plus dividing by b 0 will be a bad idea. However, if b is 1, so you can tell b is 1 in this one because there's nothing in front of the x, so it's 1x. If b is 1, then the period is just going to be 2 pi divided by 1, which is just 2 pi. So if b is 1, the period is 2 pi. Let me make more room here. So b is 1, the period is 2 pi. Phase shift, that was our left-right shift. I use PS here instead of phase shift. Also vertical shift, I use VS. And midline, I write mid. So phase shift, the left-right shift, is C divided by B. So if there is no C value here, if like in these guys, there's no C value there. If there's no C value, that means the numerator would be 0, and 0 divided by anything as long as it's not 0 is 0. So if C is 0, there is no phase shift. And that's the same thing as saying like phase shift is equal to 0. No phase shift is 0. Vertical shift slash midline is D, so this number out on the outside here. If it's positive, it goes up. If it's negative, it goes down. The vertical shift and the midline are the same idea. It's just whatever the D value is there. If there is no D value, if D is 0, let's see, what color do I have left here? We'll go purple. If D is 0, then the midline is just at the x-axis. The midline is y equals 0. The midline. Really, I should write it as an equation. So the midline, the midline is y equals 0. And it just oscillates around the x-axis. I will talk about these things in a moment. I will say that this formula, it works, but like there's so much easier ways than memorizing this formula. And the important thing, the domain of a sine or cosine function is negative infinity to infinity. So they are defined everywhere. You can put any x value you want inside of them. They're defined everywhere. All right. Down here, this is just to prove to you that all of this, boop, all of this works, and you can ignore this down here. That's written in a way I don't like. So looking at this guy here, we can identify our values. Um, let's see. So we'll say A is equal to 3. Maybe I'll write this. A is equal to 3. B is 2. C, so this says minus pi over 2, so that means pi over 2 is our C value. C is pi over 2. And there is nothing being added here on the outside, so D is equal to 0. If A is 3, that means that the amplitude should be 3. And if you look right here, from the midline to the top, that's 3. So the amplitude is 3. When B is equal to 2, that means that our period is 2 pi divided by B, so 2 pi divided by 2, which is pi. So the period is just pi, and you can see this is already marked here. So from pi over 4 to 5 pi over 4, that's a difference of pi, right? This is pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, which is pi. If C is pi over 2, that means that the phase shift, which is C divided by B, would be pi over 2 divided by 2. And I want to talk about that math real quick. So when I simplify something like this, you could make this into a fraction and then flip and multiply, but I find it a lot easier if you have a fraction within a fraction to just, I can multiply the numerator and denominator of the big fraction, so numerator, denominator of the big fraction by whatever number will cancel out the denominators. So like I'm multiplying by 2 because it'll cancel those out. And then all you're left with is pi in the numerator, and 2 times 2 is 4. So pi over 4. Pi over 4 is the phase shift. And indeed, look, it shifted over pi over 4. And D is equal to 0. That means the midline is 0. So that is the general form of sine and cosine. And in the next video, we are going to work on graphing it. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.